Mr Chairman.
The Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Mr Chairman, can I first of all commend the member who's just resumed his seat for his competent and capable chairing of the Select Committee, which has brought the bill back to the House in a better stage than it arrived at the Select Committee, in my view and the view of my colleagues who served on the committee. But I want to pose a question to the member, not that he's in a position to answer it, although it's possible that he may be in a position to be sitting as a minister in the chair in the not too distant future, the way things are going. But I'd like to pose a question for the member, and that is, at the end of 2017, when he's no longer in government, will he have achieved every single thing that he wanted to do? And I think the answer to that would be no, which is why I can say with confidence that his contribution in relation to our opposition was incorrect. That's a very generous
I'm now
assumption.
going to interrupt this member and say...
Well, that'd be a change.
Please take a seat. Responding to irrelevant responses cannot possibly be focusing on part one. And I just invite the member to focus on part one of the bill directly.
I certainly will, and actually I'm going to ask you to consider whether responding to his challenge on our position on part one is irrelevant, because in my view that is not a correct interpretation of my contribution to the debate, because it is about part one and about Labour's opposition to it. This is not the most contentious part of this bill. It is not the issue on which the House will seriously divide, and I think it's a great tragedy that we will have that in the second part of the debate. Part one is pretty small, but it covers some important issues. It covers the purpose of the bill, and I guess, if you ask most people in the House and outside, the purpose of the bill really is the fundamental part of it, because it's what it's about. Eugenie Sage has got a supplementary order paper which covers a number of proposed changes to the purpose. Just one on clause 3 on the purpose, which is to, after regular reports, insert the state of. So the purpose would become, if the amendment is agreed to, and I certainly hope it would, the purpose of this Act is to require regular reports on the state of New Zealand's environment, rather than as it currently is, reports on New Zealand's environment. And in the same way, in the interpretation on clause 4, part 1, there are 3 amendments, again proposed by Green member Eugenie Sage, and we'll be offering our support to that. Clause 4 and part 1, the interpretation was subject to quite a large number of submissions, and we've already noted the changes that were made by the Select Committee in regard to the interpretation, right through to defining who the ministers are. That's obviously going to lead us into that more substantive debate when we get to part 2. And the insertion, Scott Simpson, the chair of the committee, said that this was by majority. I thought it was a unanimous insertion of the members nodding. So is that indicating that it was the 4A Treaty of Waitangi insertion? I thought it was unanimous. It may have been by majority, but it calls into question the contribution that Minister Nick Smith made in this regard, and backed up by the earlier contribution of Eugenie Sage. The Treaty of Waitangi section in 4A Part 1 is quite a new way of legislative recognition of the Crown's responsibility in regard to the treaty. I'm not sure where the members decided that that was appropriate, but it was clearly discussed at the Select Committee. It wasn't a close vote, if it was indeed a majority vote, and it certainly got support. I think that that's going to give us new challenges in terms of our understanding of the Crown's responsibility. That's not a bad thing, and I'm really wanting to express my appreciation to the committee for giving us that opportunity. Mr Chairman, in relation to the submissions and the interpretation, a lot of submitters noted the absence of definitions for key terms that were used in the bill and asked for clearer definitions. The part that we're no longer able to discuss was one example of that, but Mr. Chairman.
Ruth Dyson.
But I won't obviously be referring to that.
I apologise.
Sorry?
The Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Thanks, Honourable Mr. Chairman. There were 4 submitters that were specifically concerned about the definition of domains, and these are important organisations who had a substantive amount of consideration and input into this legislation: the Environmental Defence Society, Local Government New Zealand, McGuinness Institute and Seafood New Zealand. So they were specifically concerned about the definition of domains in the interpretation provisions. These again will be subject to more debate in part 2, where we look at the domains and the synthesis reports, but it is important for us to consider whether we've got the interpretation sections correct and whether we've met the concerns of the submitters, because, as I say, I think they were substantial contributions. Other submitters looked at the impact categories, the ecological integrity, the public health, the economic benefits, the culture and recreation, and again said that there should be more specific definitions around those. I think that the one that was singled out by most submitters, though, was the term
order. I am going to interrupt the member on the same basis as I should have interrupted other members earlier. We are now debating the bill as it was reported from the Select Committee and the amendment of Eugenie Sage. We're not debating what is not in here. That was done at the second reading. If there was an amendment up to include something, it becomes relevant. If it's not, it's not. The Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Could you just alert me to the relevance of that in relation to what I was saying? Because I actually can't make the connection.
I think the member was clearly listing a group of submissions about things which should have been included in part 1 of the bill. And it...
Geez, tonight.
Which is not relevant. It's a bill
I don't think it's our lucky night. Mr. Simpson, you can pass on my sharing of this feeling to Mr. McIndoe when you see him later in the evening. I think there's been a bit of a hiccup in the communication. What I was it's only 9:15. I don't think anyone's voting for an early knockoff. So what I was referring to was specifically well, if you're suggesting you might be leaving early, that might be a different matter. It was just a light-hearted response to your interjection, of course. So what I was referring to were the changes that were made in the interpretation area, because they were the subject of substantive submissions and they were agreed by the committee. So I'm commenting on the changes that were made and therefore are reported back and are included in part 1. And in fact, particularly if you look at the changes that were made by the committee in relation to ecological integrity, it now says ecological integrity means the full potential of Indigenous biotic and abiotic features and natural processes functioning in sustainable communities, habitats and landscapes, which is a result of the contribution from submitters. So that's where my earlier contribution was leading to. Mr. Chairman, I just want to conclude by again referring to the SOP in the name of Eugenie Sage. It relates, in relation to clause 4, it has the definition, in the definition of topic, it asks to replace regulations with notice in the Gazette in clause 44B, to replace regulations with a notice in Gazette, and the same in 44B, line 26. I've noticed a tendency in some debates that we've had that the National Party has just voted against SOPs that are put up by members, but I urge further consideration, particularly led by the Chairman of the committee, because there has been some constructive debate about this bill. Even though we'll end up voting against it, we have, I think, had a contribution that has been helpful to the debate, and in the end, if we'd had an environmental reporting bill as defined in the interpretation sections in Clause 4, that would mean that we could have an independent setting of the atmosphere and climatic domains, for example, the air domains, then it would be a bill that we could support.
Okay, the question is that Eugenie Sage's amendment to Clause 3 set out in SOP number 87 be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. The contrary opinion will say no. The ayes have it. A party vote is called for. The clerk will conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 opposed.
New Zealand Labour.
32 in favour.
Green Party.
14 in favour.
New Zealand First.
12 votes in favour.
Maori Party.
1 in favour. Oh, sorry, correction, 2 in favour.
Ag New Zealand.
1 opposed.
United Future.
1 opposed.
The ayes are 60, the noes are 61. The amendment is not agreed to. We now move to Eugenia Sage's amendments to clauses 4 and 4A set out on SOP number 87. Those are in favour of those amendments will say aye. Aye. To the contrary will say no. Aye. The noes have it. Party vote has been called for. The clerk will conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 opposed.
New Zealand Labour.
32 in favour.
Green Party.
14 in favour.
New Zealand First.
12 votes in favour.
Maori Party.
2 in favour.
Ag New Zealand.
1 opposed.
United Future.
1 opposed.
The ayes are 60, the noes are 61. The amendments are not agreed to. The question now is that Part 1 stand part. Those are of that opinion will say aye. Aye. Contrary opinion will say no. The ayes have it. A party vote is called for. The clerk will conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
32 opposed.
Green Party.
14 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
12 votes opposed.
Maori Party.
2 in favour.
Ag New Zealand.
1 in favour.
United Future.
1 in favour.
The ayes are 63, the noes are 58. Part 1 will stand part.